Congratulations, Donk. You just won IEM Katowice 2024. But you've created a problem. Now you've got 400 clones of yourself on Faceit, and they all can't make it past level 6. If you've ever played more than 5 minutes of matchmaking, you know what I'm talking about. You and I have both had the misfortune of playing with Forest, with an O, Get Left, Cold Tuera, Something Zera, Guardian with an M, and Simple from India. The advice to keep watching better players is repeated so much that people try to copy literally everything. Whenever somebody wins a tournament, the page that has the config settings for that professional has its traffic skyrocket. Let me break it to you. You're not Simple, nor Stewie, nor Guardian, nor Donk. You are your own person. Your brain's ability to compute situations, your reaction time, the dimensions of your hands, everything you can think of, even maybe your eyesight, are, well, they're all different. So trying to use someone else's settings and mouse and keyboard is kind of like seeing a well-fitting t-shirt on someone a foot shorter than you, and then buying it in the same size to achieve the same fit. So what do you copy? Surely there's some merit to it, right? Well, that's when you should find the lowest common denominator of what a good play or good form within the game is, and then you can work from there for your own personal goals, rather than copying the end result of adaptations. Here's a couple examples. This is how closely Zentaris sits to his monitor, and these are Fasher's keybinds because he's used to another game. And this is where Walker keeps his keyboard on his lap. And this is how JDM sits in his chair. If you see something interesting that required a complicated sequence of actions, like movement or aim or whatever, just consider how you could accomplish the same goal in your own comfortable style. Scream's gameplay is still iconic for his tapping style, but most people would argue that it's not replicable by most others. If you try to do that, you usually end up copying the convoluted end result of prodigies who are more often than not simply anomalies. And by the way, we see this in other sports all the time as well. For example, in weightlifting, the most commonly used technique to put a barbell above your head in the split and jerk portion of the competition is the split jerk. But then, prodigies like Liu Xiaojun are going to use an entirely different technique called the squat jerk, which is in theory considered less optimal for others, but they're going to use it and win anyway. These are all personal adaptations. They cannot be applied to everyone on a general level. And this isn't a beginner mistake. I see this in pro players and semi-pro players all the time. Please stop changing your crosshairs. Just find one that you actually like, that you can clearly see at a distance slightly farther than where you generally sit at, and one that doesn't blend into most environments, and just stick to it. You need to get used to whatever crosshair you're playing so your eyes are more adjusted to seeing it in more environments. Just because you chose a green crosshair and it looked really good on Anubis and it was all visible, doesn't mean it's going to be the same way when you switch over to Ancient. Comfort is king, and I promise you that there is no crosshair buff as long as you're used to what you're playing with. And if you still need convincing, just think of how differently everyone else perceives settings. When you're copying someone's crosshair, do you also sit at the same distance from the monitor? When you get the exact same mouse as someone else, do you consider how different it feels to them because of the weight or musculature of their wrists and hands? Will you actually be able to use a keyboard the same way as someone else that you're copying? Do you have the exact same hands and eyes? Don't get me wrong, there are adjustments and settings that can make you play a little bit better or worse, but if you've figured out the basics already, switching back and forth will most likely just be a sidestep that wastes your time because you're engaged with getting used to new settings rather than improving at the game. When you're watching demos, stop trying to copy exact mechanics, and rather try and evaluate objectives. If you see someone winning aim duels, instead of looking at how quickly they're able to flick, try and recognize why they're positioned the way they are, the timings they're using to peek out, and what they're doing to make themselves harder to hit. These general things apply to you. Copying how they flick, on the other hand, probably not. And to the viewer, sorry you had to hear it from me, but if this is something you're genuinely struggling with, I think settings aren't your issue, and neither is your setup. Copying someone else isn't going to make you better. The best version of you as a player is better than the best copy you'll ever be able to come up with.